Divine Feminine, listen carefully. In this mid-December moment, the energy around you is shifting so drastically that you hardly recognize your own heart anymore. The love is still there, but the longing is gone. The connection is still real, but the dependency has died. And the masculine, the very one you once defended with your whole soul, now begins to irritate you, disappoint you, trigger you, even feel like someone you might no longer want around. You find yourself looking at him not with desire, but with discernment, not with hope, but with realism, not through rose-colored memories, but with awakened eyes. And suddenly, you don't like what you see. This isn't because your love disappeared, it's because you stopped abandoning yourself. It's the stage where the pedestal you put him on finally crumbles. You no longer see him as a hero or a missing piece. You realize that for so long you were in love with his potential, not his presence, with his soul, not his actions, with who he could be in the future, not the man he is today. Your heart becomes allergic to the things it once tolerated. Inconsistency, silence, immaturity, excuses, running, all of it suddenly feels unbearable. You no longer glamorize the lessons. You're tired of being tested. You're done extracting meaning from the pain. And for the first time, you ask yourself, why did I ever accept so little, even in the name of destiny? It's not that he suddenly changed overnight, it's that you finally grew. This moment can feel terrifying, because you start to question everything you once trusted. You wonder, was the connection real? Were the signs real? Was the love real at all? You question whether you were naive, whether you wasted time, whether this journey hurt your healing more than it helped. But understand, Divine Feminine, this isn't the collapse of your journey, it's the collapse of an illusion. You are no longer seduced by his shadow. You are no longer entertained by the push and pull game. You are no longer emotionally sustained by breadcrumbs. Your soul starts rejecting anything that doesn't match your worth. Your nervous system refuses to remain in chase mode. Your heart refuses to keep hurting itself. Your intuition refuses to wait for someone who isn't choosing growth. The discomfort and dislike you're feeling is actually the clarity you once prayed for. You're no longer blinded by longing. At last, you see his wounds clearly, and you feel no urge to mother them. You see his fear, and you have no desire to rescue him from it. You sense his hesitation, and you no longer intend to wait for it to disappear. Your heart has matured beyond fantasy. And that very maturity is what activates the final stage of this journey. Because as soon as you pull your energy back, he suddenly loses the comfort he was so sure of. When you stop chasing him, he is forced to confront why he's been running. When you stop idealizing him, he has to face who he really is right now. And for the first time, he fears not just losing your love, but losing access to the woman his soul has always been bound to. Your dislike for his behavior is not rejection, it's realignment. It's your soul declaring that this version of him cannot move forward with you. He must rise. And that truth shakes him awake. Divine Feminine, you are not turning cold, you're growing conscious. You are not losing love, you are shedding illusions. You are not pushing him away, you are drawing your own energy back into alignment. And in that alignment, something powerful happens. You no longer yearn for the masculine who runs. Now you desire only the masculine who comes home. Your heart now demands a higher form of love, because you have become a higher version of yourself. The masculine now has two choices, to rise or to release. What he can no longer do is keep you waiting in a place you've outgrown. The mid-December energy has drawn a line in the sand. This is the point of no return. All the delays, all the fear and avoidance that once held this journey back are collapsing under this shift. That's why you are starting to dislike him, not because the journey is ending, but because the real union is finally beginning. Destiny doesn't want you to love who he was. Destiny wants you to love who he is becoming. And now he has no choice but to become. Why? Because the mid-December shift has begun, and your soul is starting to feel resistance. Divine Feminine, there comes a moment in this journey when your soul refuses to continue playing out the cycle that once felt impossible to escape. You begin to feel a strange new resistance toward the masculine, something unfamiliar, because it contradicts everything you thought love was supposed to feel like. Instead of longing, you feel irritation. Instead of desire, you feel disappointment. Instead of chasing, you find yourself withdrawing. And it's not that the connection is dying, it's that you are waking up. For so long, you carried hope like a lifeline. You held the vision of union with both hands, even while he ran from that same vision in fear. You believed in the potential of this connection even when the reality was painful. You made excuses for his silence, his distance, his avoidance, convincing yourself that if you just loved him a little harder, he would finally meet you halfway. But now, your heart no longer accepts bare minimum effort disguised as spiritual justification. Your soul is tired of waiting for him to become the man you always saw inside him. This resistance you're feeling isn't anger, it's self-respect returning home. It's your intuition stepping up to lead where your wounded heart used to. It's that moment when your inner voice calmly but firmly says, "Enough." Not from bitterness, but from absolute clarity. You've outgrown the kind of love that demanded you be endlessly patient and forgiving while he stayed the same. You start to look at him through the eyes of the woman you've become, not the woman you were at the beginning. And suddenly the excuses don't make sense anymore. The scraps of his affection no longer feel romantic. The runner-chaser dynamic that once felt fated now just feels destructive. You finally see the truth that was always there: the connection is real, but the imbalance was never divine. This realization changes everything, because now you're no longer attached to the illusion, you are aligned with the truth. You feel resistance because your soul is rejecting the outdated dynamic. It refuses to keep loving him through the lens of his unhealed patterns. When his actions and energy contradict the goodness of his soul, you feel repelled instead of attracted. When he stays silent and your heart is screaming for honesty, you no longer romanticize his silence. When he avoids the connection, you no longer blame yourself for his avoidance. It's not that he changed, it's that you evolved. And your evolution now demands alignment, not empty promises, not mere potential, not your intuition desperately trying to validate every little sign. You need consistency. You need effort. You need a truly awakened masculine. You need the divine masculine, not the wounded masculine masquerading as destiny. And your resistance is your soul's way of saying, "I will not sacrifice myself for love anymore." This is the moment you realize that unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance. That a spiritual connection does not excuse emotional immaturity. That telepathy is not a substitute for communication. That mirrored feelings do not replace mirrored effort. Your heart wakes up to the truth that love isn't proven by how much pain you can endure, but by how deeply you can honor yourself. And as you embrace that truth, you begin to withdraw the energy that once kept him so comfortable. You stop holding the connection together for both of you. You stop believing he's incapable of rising. You stop shrinking yourself to avoid overwhelming him with the intensity of your love. You're no longer waiting for him to recognize what you already embody. This resistance is liberation, because without it you would have kept loving him from a place of fear. Fear of losing him, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being wrong about it all. But resistance dissolves those fears, and in their place, empowerment rises. Your energy turns inward. Your heart chooses peace. Your spirit chooses freedom. And for the first time, you stop fighting for the connection and instead allow it to transform. Divine Feminine, when you find yourself disliking the version of him that refuses to evolve, it isn't rejection. It's preparation. Your soul is making space, separating the man he has been from the man he must become. The masculine cannot enter into union as a runner, and your energy now makes that impossible. This is why you're feeling resistance, because the version of him that hurt you is not the version meant to love you. You're no longer attracted to the part of him ruled by fear, you're only drawn to the part of him rooted in truth. And until he becomes that truth, you will keep choosing yourself. Divine Feminine, one of the most powerful moments in your awakening is when the picture you painted of him finally dissolves. Not because your love faded, but because you can no longer pretend the man he is today is the man he has the potential to be while he's still choosing fear. For so long, you saw him through the filter of potential. You loved the highest version of him, the one his soul showed you in dreams, in synchronicities, in those rare moments of vulnerability. But now your spirit refuses to pretend that his potential is his reality. The idealization breaks, not with anger, but with truth. You start to see the separation between who he is and who he could be. Between the connection that is divine and the behavior that is human and flawed. Between the soul in him that recognizes you and the ego in him that runs from you. This realization is not pleasant. It hurts because you have to admit that you were holding on to a version of him that hasn't yet come into existence. This is the moment you stop glorifying what you feel and start acknowledging what you receive. You notice the contradictions you used to ignore. The mixed signals that once felt like a mystery now feel like emotional irresponsibility. The silence that once felt like some intuitive calm before the storm now feels like straight-up avoidance. The hesitation from him that once made you patient now makes you distant. And the words he doesn't say now matter more than the ones he once did. Your soul no longer lets illusions shield your heart from disappointment. Now it protects your heart with reality. Yes, idealizing him kept your hope alive, but it also kept you stuck. It let you believe that his emotional immaturity was somehow destiny, that all the painful lessons were signs of union instead of signs of imbalance. It made you believe that confusion was love, that inconsistency was depth, that endless waiting was divine timing, rather than you abandoning your own timing. But everything changes when your inner light grows brighter than your attachment. You stop wanting him to change for you. You only want him to change for himself. And if he doesn't, your soul will not settle. You no longer crave the fantasy, you crave the truth. This shift is disorienting, because it feels like your heart is pulling away from the very thing it prayed for. But in truth, your heart is pulling away from the illusion, not from the love. The love remains, but the idealization dies. And once it dies, you can no longer pretend that his past behavior was acceptable just because the future looked promising. You begin to see him as a whole human, flawed, afraid, avoidant, instead of a spiritual savior. And from that clarity, you realize your love cannot substitute for his growth. Your devotion cannot replace his accountability. Your intuition cannot fix his refusal to face himself. Idealization truly ends when you recognize that love is not enough if he refuses to meet you halfway. You feel the gap between his intentions and his actions. You feel the disappointment of knowing he's capable of so much more, yet still choosing less. You feel the frustration of watching him run from the very connection that could save him from the emptiness inside. And for the first time, you stop justifying that gap, you simply acknowledge it. That acknowledgement is freedom. Because now you're no longer in love with the man you imagined, you're aligned only with the man he must become. The version of him that avoids communication does not deserve the version of you who speaks her truth. The version of him that chooses fear cannot match the version of you that chooses growth. The version of him that hides away cannot align with the version of you that shines bright. Understand that your growing dislike is your soul's way of rejecting what no longer honors your evolution. As the idealization falls apart, the truth comes out. You are not asking for too much, he has been giving too little. Your heart is done shrinking itself to keep the connection comfortable. It's done lowering its standards to make the journey seem possible. It's done carrying a love that he refuses to hold. Divine Feminine, this is not the end of the story. It is the end of pretending. And once the illusion breaks, the real transformation can finally begin. Not because you stopped believing in him, but because you started believing in yourself. Divine Feminine, there comes a point when your emotional exhaustion becomes impossible to ignore. It's that moment when your heart stops begging for reciprocation and starts demanding alignment. When your soul refuses to burn itself up just to keep the connection warm. When your energy no longer can carry both sides of the bond. And that exhaustion is not weakness, it is awakening. For a long time, you gave love from a place of pure faith. You poured yourself into this connection because you felt the truth beneath the chaos, the depth beneath the distance, the soul beneath the silence. You fought for it because spiritually you knew this love was different, sacred, destined. But faith without reciprocity turns into imbalance. Your heart has reached a point where it can no longer sustain a love that drains instead of nourishes. What once felt romantic, the unconditional giving, the endless waiting, the constant forgiving, now feels unsustainable. The burden of being the only one emotionally awake has become too heavy to carry. Patience has turned into depletion. Devotion has turned into self-abandonment. And the feminine cannot thrive in abandonment, she thrives in truth. Your emotional exhaustion becomes the catalyst for clarity. You stop operating from hope and start operating from self-respect. You stop responding to energy that doesn't show up for you. You stop tolerating behavior that contradicts the very meaning of love. This is where discernment is born. Discernment means looking at love and asking yourself, is this supporting who I am becoming? Instead of, how can I fix what he refuses to face? It marks the shift where your heart stops chasing and starts choosing. Choosing peace over chaos. Choosing reciprocity over fantasy. Choosing alignment over attachment. You start noticing the truth behind each emotion. When he pulls away, you no longer panic. When he goes silent, you no longer collapse. When he avoids the connection, you no longer blame yourself, because you know deep down that his inability to show up is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of where he is in his healing. Your emotional system is rewriting the rules. The part of you that once accepted breadcrumbs now craves a feast. The part of you that once tolerated confusion now demands clarity. The part of you that once forgave everything now loves herself far too much to do that anymore. This exhaustion is not a shutdown, it's a reset. It's your entire being saying, we are done repeating cycles that do not support us. You realize that love does not require you to suffer, that this connection is meant to expand you, not limit you. That your intuition deserves a partner who listens, not one who runs. Your energy becomes sacred ground, and not everyone gets to walk there anymore. And the masculine feels this change immediately. When you stop using love to justify pain, the wound is no longer at the center of your relationship. When you stop waiting, he feels the loss of the emotional safety you once gave. When you stop bending to accommodate his fear, he is forced to confront it. He begins to feel the emptiness that he once left you sitting in. And that's when everything changes. Because your emotional exhaustion is not the end of the connection, it's the end of the version of the connection built on imbalance. Your discernment turns your energy into a sanctuary that only truth can enter. If he wants to return, he must return as the man who is no longer afraid to love you the way you deserve. If he wants to stay in your life, he must evolve, not hide. If he wants this love, he must move toward it, not run from it. Divine Feminine, this exhaustion is a doorway. Through it, you step fully into your power. Through it, you become the woman who will no longer accept love that costs her self-worth. Through it, you transform the entire dynamic. Emotional exhaustion doesn't mean you're giving up, it means you finally understand what you deserve. Divine Feminine, something profound happens when your heart shifts from craving him to questioning him. When the love is still there, but your acceptance of his behavior is gone. When the bond remains unbreakable, but the dynamic becomes unacceptable. This is the moment the masculine begins to wake up, because your energy is no longer a place he can hide. For so long, he felt your unconditional love as a certainty, a comfort, a constant. Even while he ran, avoided, and suppressed his feelings, he relied on your heart. You were his safety net, his home, his steady source of gravity. He assumed your forgiveness before he even apologized. He assumed your presence even when he was absent. But now that comfort is slipping away. You are no longer impressed by promises, you want action. You are no longer moved by potential, you want embodiment. You are no longer willing to hold this connection all on your own. He must show up too. And when that reality hits, he feels it like a shock to his soul. The masculine awakens not through romance, but through reality. He starts to feel the consequences of his hesitation. He feels the pain of possibly losing what he never properly valued. He feels the urgency he once ignored. Your energy used to chase him, now it challenges him. Your love used to soothe him, now it summons him. When you stop idealizing him, he is forced to see himself with the same stark clarity that you do. He sees the gulf between who he is and who he needs to become. He sees how small he's been acting in front of a woman whose soul keeps expanding. He sees the immaturity in behaviors he once excused as just needing time. He realizes he's been running from the only thing that ever felt real. And this realization is not comfortable. It shakes him. It scares him. It wakes him up to the truth, because your energy now reveals what he couldn't see when you adored him. You will not settle for the version of him that refuses to grow. This becomes his turning point. He starts checking your social media more often, looking for any sign of your life. He starts remembering every moment you shared together. He replays every word you ever spoke that pointed to his fears. He starts wondering who you are becoming without him. He finds himself feeling jealous of men he never cared about before. He imagines you with someone else, and it absolutely terrifies him, because for the first time, the masculine truly fears losing access to you. Your pulling away is like a spiritual alarm ringing in his soul. It forces him into a crossroads: transform, or lose you to the woman you are becoming, the very woman his soul recognized as his true counterpart. He realizes now that your love was never a given, it was a gift, and he did not honor it. Your dissatisfaction becomes his mirror. It shows him how emotionally unavailable he's been. It exposes all his excuses. It dismantles his ego. It destroys the illusion that you would wait forever. He loses the privilege of your warmth, and that loss awakens his strength. He loses the comfort of your presence, and that absence ignites his desire. He loses the version of you who needed him, and that compels him to grow into the man who could truly deserve you. Divine Feminine, your dislike for the old him does not kill the connection, it resurrects his purpose. It calls forth the masculine who is ready to love you openly, fiercely, and without fear. When you stop running toward him, he has no choice but to run toward himself. And in that journey, he discovers the courage to come back to you, not because he's afraid to lose you, but because he finally understands what you truly mean to him. This awakening in him is not the end, it's the beginning of his transformation. It's the moment he chooses to rise, not out of obligation to you, but because his soul finally remembers what it was made for. Divine Feminine, this is the moment everything changes. When you stop accepting the old dynamic, you're not just changing your behavior, you are changing the frequency of the entire connection. The rules that once trapped you in hope and disappointment no longer apply. You're not waiting for him to wake up, you are awake. And once awakened, you can't pretend to be blind again. Your soul makes a decision before your mind even catches up. It decides that the version of him who avoids, delays, and hides has no place in your future. It decides that love cannot exist without responsibility. That destiny does not excuse disrespect. That your heart will not be a placeholder for his potential. This refusal isn't rebellion, it's evolution. You're not rejecting him, you're rejecting the energy he used to bring. You're not pushing him away, you're lifting yourself upward. You're not closing the door, you're closing the wound. You stop responding to mixed signals. You stop accepting crumbs and calling them a spiritual connection. You stop seeing his inability to show up as a flaw in you. Your love becomes sacred ground, and access must be earned. When you refuse the old dynamic, he feels something he never expected, the loss of control. He can no longer predict your reactions. He can no longer rely on your patience. He can no longer disappear and assume you'll be there when he returns. Your silence now echoes louder than his distance ever did. The entire equilibrium is disrupted. The runner no longer has a chaser. The avoider no longer has someone absorbing the pain. The one who disconnected has no one bridging the gap. Your energy steps out of the past and demands a future. Now his fear of change is outweighed by his fear of losing you. His old excuses suddenly seem pathetic, even to him. The behaviors he once clung to now look like self-sabotage. He can see that the dynamic which protected his comfort was actually dishonoring the connection. Your refusal forces him to truly face himself. He knows now that he can't come back with pretty words or half-hearted promises. He must come back genuinely transformed, not just rehearsed. He must show, not convince. He must act, not assume. Because now, you're not falling for potential, you respond only to effort. An effort was the one thing he avoided until he realized he could lose the woman his soul had chosen long before this life. Your boundaries become the bridge to his evolution. Your standards become the measure of his growth. Your refusal becomes the turning point of his awakening. If he wants a place in your life, he must rise into the man you always knew he could be. He must meet you at the level of his soul, instead of dragging the connection down to the level of his fear. Your refusal is not the end of the love story, it's proof of your expansion. It's the moment you stop waltzing with potential and start building a future grounded in reality. He now understands he cannot return as the man who left. He knows you won't bend just to keep him. He knows the old version of him is unwelcome now, either in your heart nor in your destiny. And that understanding is his first real step toward change. Divine Feminine, there comes a time when the roles simply collapse. The runner can't run. The chaser no longer wants to chase. The energy flips and the dynamic reverses. The masculine begins to experience what the feminine once endured. And that shift changes everything. While you ascend into clarity, self-respect, and wholeness, he starts to feel the absence of the you that he always took for granted. Not your physical absence, but the absence of your energy. The absence of your emotional labor. The absence of your constant reassurance. The absence of your unconditional presence. For the first time, he reaches out for your energy and finds it isn't there. He feels a magnetic pull toward you now, stronger than ever. Not because you're holding on to him, but because you've let go. When the feminine releases her fear, her energy becomes irresistible. The very force that once made him run now draws him in. This change is terrifying for him. He can't understand why he suddenly feels so much urgency. Why the silence he used to find peaceful now feels suffocating. Why his usual distractions no longer numb him. Why his heart is suddenly louder than his logic. He surveys his life and everything he built away from you feels empty. The space he carved out to avoid vulnerability now only highlights what he's missing. He misses how alive he felt in your light. And when he realizes that you're no longer reaching out, something cracks inside him. His pride weakens. His fear shakes. His avoidance loses its grip. He begins to chase, but not like before, not out of ego or panic. This time, his soul is in the driver's seat. He wants to feel your energy again. He wants to understand what shifted in you. He wants to ensure he doesn't lose the one person who truly feels like destiny. The masculine finally sees that your absence isn't a threat, it's a wake-up call. He starts to question himself in ways he never dared to before. He replays every time he ignored the connection. He reflects on how you showed up with love while he showed up with fear. He feels the consequences of his silence, the weight of his indecision. He feels the distance now not as freedom, but as loss. You used to carry both your soul and his in this journey. Now he must carry his own weight, and that responsibility is changing him. He begins to pursue the connection from a place of truth, not desperation. He steps forward with effort, not illusion. He rises instead of hides. This shift isn't happening because the universe is punishing him. It's happening because you stop punishing yourself. Your healing is forcing his awakening. Your evolution is forcing his transformation. Your alignment is forcing his action. That's why this final stage feels so different. You're not waiting anymore. You're not wishing anymore. You're not barely surviving anymore. You are leading with your presence. You are attracting through your peace. You are guiding by your example of alignment, and he feels it. The masculine who once feared commitment now fears losing the woman who embodies everything he wants but never believed he deserved. He doesn't chase you now because you're slipping away. He chases because he knows you will never again settle for less than the love you deserve. The polarity has flipped. He must become the man you always saw in him, or he will lose the woman who has now truly seen her own worth. Divine Feminine, when you first felt that surge of dislike toward him, you feared something had gone wrong. You thought your heart was closing, that your love was fading, that the journey was falling apart. But what you felt was not the end of the connection. It was the end of the illusion. It was your liberation arriving, disguised as anger. It was your soul saying, "Enough. Enough waiting. Enough hurting. Enough carrying this connection alone. Feeling this frustration toward him was not a failure, it was a breakthrough. For the first time, you saw him without the halo of potential. You saw the reality of who he was choosing to be, not the fantasy of who he could be. And that contrast cracked something open inside you, not to destroy the love, but to destroy your willingness to accept anything less than its highest form. You didn't fall out of love, you fell out of self-abandonment. You stopped glorifying the bare minimum. You stopped romanticizing inconsistency. You stopped calling his emotional absence a spiritual phase. You stopped confusing a soul connection with an excuse for suffering. That moment of clear disillusionment was when you realized, unconditional love does not mean unconditional tolerance. And that realization is the greatest act of self-respect you, as the divine feminine, could ever embody. Now you have become unshakable. Not careless, but clear. Not detached, but dignified. Not cold, but conscious. You didn't lose the connection, you lost the desperation that once fueled it. You didn't stop caring, you stopped bleeding for someone who wasn't prepared to hold your heart gently. Your liberation, the moment you chose yourself, is the awakening he can no longer ignore. Because when a woman like you, a soul like yours, stands firmly in her truth, the masculine is compelled to face his own. He sees the gap between who he is and who he must become. He knows now that time is not unlimited, that he can't hide behind fear forever. He realizes that the woman who once stayed through it all now will choose herself above all else. That awareness terrifies him. It awakens him. It starts to transform him. Your liberation became his initiation. Now he finally experiences what it's like to miss you, not the you who was always there, but the you who is now sovereign, selective, awakened. He feels the urgent call to evolve, not because you begged him to, but because he cannot imagine life with the old version of himself anymore. He understands that he must rise, or risk becoming the man who lost the only woman meant for his soul. Divine Feminine, this feeling of discontent is not a curse, it's preparation. It is clearing the way for the love you are ready to receive. A love that does not drain you. A love that does not confuse you. A love that does not require you to shrink. A love that meets you where you stand, because you now refuse to kneel. You are not ending the journey, you're ending the phase where you carried both hearts alone. You are not truly pushing him away, you are pushing this connection into true alignment. This moment is your coronation. This moment is your rebirth. This moment is where suffering ends and sovereignty begins. You did not stop loving him, you stopped abandoning yourself for him. And that shift in you is exactly what pulls union closer. The dislike was never about hating him. It was about you finally choosing the woman you have become.